So I was told to delay for a little while. Look at the crowd go silent. How'd you like to do that and have all these eyes on you right now as you plug up the PowerPoint? I was told to delay because the tickets are printed with 1:30 on them, and we may have some people that didn't see the internet. I'm not going to delay 30 minutes, but that's why I'm dragging my feet here. I've told you the last 2 days, my boss told me to hurry up and don't be delaying people. Now I've been told to slow it down, So that's why I was dragging my feet here, if that works. So, what have I got here? Worth publishing. There you go. Probably might want to take a look at that. You know, they've got all these new programs that they have come up with for research and everything, and I've never updated. I just cut and paste stuff onto the PowerPoint or whatever. There's my dad's eulogy from his funeral. You want to see that? Can read that again. Let's see here. Here's my legal documents. Y'all want to see what I'm leaving my kids? Not much. So we could take about anything we wanted here. You know, Fitz-John Porter, the two things, Fitz-John Porter just didn't hit. When I did the Fitz-John Porter program, nobody's ever talked about that at all. It must have been a complete disaster. And another one that I was really surprised didn't go over well was the Michael Shara one. I thought that would be cool, but y'all didn't like that either. So, apparently. So, yeah.
You got 30 minutes, just start one of these.
Yeah, just start one. There's one you liked. Here's Lee the Last Years. Y'all like that one a lot. That's probably. Juba Early and Confederate Memory was up there. Y'all really like that. That one was interesting.
You have time to tell us about England?
I'll tell you about England. That's kind of hit the internet, hasn't it? About England. Yeah, that wasn't nice. That was like His Majesty government didn't take a liking to me. And I didn't like that. I was like, my God, people. It's like your son. It's all your son's fault, ma'am. That's what I'm going to tell you. Right over there. That's whose fault it is. No, we're just hanging out. Let's talk about some more about Matt's mishaps in London, England. That was quite an expensive lesson. I was taking Ben on his senior trips, what I was attempting to do. It just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. I never got there. Today is the anniversary of Jim Morrison's death. Yeah. And if you, somebody pointed that out to me this morning. And so I've been playing Doors music. I've been sending this person Doors music the whole time, you know. And yeah, so it's funny how you change. Back when I had hair, when you're younger, you emulate these people. My son is right now for some reason, he wants to be Anthony Bourdain. If that's the way you say that. Why, I don't know. I said, do you want to cook or do you want to travel? I don't know which one that you want. No, I like his tattoo. I said, well, don't like that. I said, right there. Well, I don't know. I'm so glad I didn't get the Motley Crue tattoo. I don't know. Congratulations to y'all that still got it, but I'm so glad I didn't get the Stones or I didn't get Grateful Dead or whatever. Can't think of a thing. So when I was younger, I wanted to be I don't know if I wanted to be Jim Morrison, but you want to be that swagger, and you want to, live for the moment and worry about tomorrow. And now at age 55, I think I just want to live a while longer, instead of dying at 27. Wasn't he 27, Club? So, yeah, so we're sitting here delaying because Chris Gwinn told me to delay. And, oh, we're good? Okay. All right. So, why don't you open up the door, Dan? Is he standing right there? Chris. He's not? Is he around the corner still right there? Yes. Let's open the door up for him right here. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever wanted to see a goat rope, it is the past 2 days, past 3 days, when they called the program off, the outdoor programs off, and we were scrambling to put this together. It wasn't we that put it together. It was my boss, Chris Gwinn, who had to undergo and completely reshuffle the chairs on the Titanic as it was going down, okay? So how about a round of applause for Mr. Gwinn? Chris gets mad at me about once a week, once a month, something like that. But, that kind of segues into what we're talking about here today, I'm a firm believer, I'm the most dangerous employee that you can have. In the sense that I don't have any aspirations to go any higher, right? So I don't have anything, I don't go out here and tell you your jokes are funny. I don't come in your office and tell you how great your hair is or what, I love that uniform on you today. No, we don't. But, going into Picketts Charge, what is the job of a subordinate? And you apply this to your own workplace, okay? What is a good subordinate? A good subordinate to me is somebody that tells the boss what is my best opinion. You don't tell the boss what he wants to hear. No, you don't do that's doing nobody any good about that. Now, if you apply it to Picketts Charge and you tie it to a military situation, Longstreet is of that same mindset, I think. James Longstreet, who to start this conversation off is the second in command of the entire Army. He would be the senior corps commander here. If Robert E. Lee gets shot, he would be commanding this Army. And the job of Longstreet, and I agree with him, is to tell him, Lee, what his best opinion is. That's what he wants him to do. And so he does that. And I think that's correct. Now, where does that start and when does that stop? When Chris and I have a disagreement, which is, I don't mean to overblow it, we don't get in the shouting matches or anything like that, but what is my job as a subordinate? Once I disagreed about canceling the outdoor programs, all right? Well, I sent one text, and he didn't agree with me, or it was out of his hands, however he looks at that. And what is my job now? My job is to execute the order. The order is to do indoor programs, and my job is to come in here and execute this program as best as I can, to give y'all, to impart, make you think, and then hopefully give you something that you haven't thought about before, or to teach you something that you may not, or you may have forgotten. And then the law enforcement showed up, okay? And so I don't want anybody getting unruly, as I was just saying. It's law and order in here every time. And I want you to know, if anybody gets out of hand, okay, yes, they're going to take you outside, and we're going to have a tune-up, what they used to call a tune-up in the old cop days, before there was body cams and cameras. Back in Mississippi, they give you a tune-up on the way to the jail, just to make sure you were pliable when you got in there, right? Obeying, you'd obey. You would. All right. So anyway, going back to Longstreet, I don't know how this program looks. I saw a video of Shelby Foote the other day, and he said that he was talking about writing, not the Civil War. And he says, as an author, you only know what you intended the book to mean or to say or whatever, but you truly never know what it does say because you can't be the audience that's reading it, if that makes sense. I kind of convoluted that for him right there. So I don't know how I come across in this program, if I'm pro-Lee or anti-Lee or pro-Longstreet or anti-Longstreet. The bottom line that I would try to tell you right now is going back to what I was saying about our work relationship, my work relationship here. And you can apply this to personal relationships, especially for y'all that have been together for a while. Some of you in the back possibly longer than others, you know, maybe you've been to a few video tapings together or something like that. There are times when you are not communicating well. If you've been in a relationship that long, you will know what I'm talking about, and that applies to professional and personal relationships. And it appears to me, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, at the Battle of Gettysburg, that Lee and Longstreet are not communicating right here. That doesn't mean they dislike each other. In a relationship, you can always hopefully love each other, but there are days, no, that you don't like each other. Okay, and they just aren't gelling. So the purpose of the program, I don't want y'all to get all antsy and everything. The purpose of the program is not to rehash Picketts Charge in the sense that we're going to crash over the wall and do all this stuff. We're not going to do that, okay? The purpose of the program is the planning of Picketts Charge. That's where I'm going. So for y'all, all the people that are here to support their spouse, for those of you who just happen to wander in here and had no idea what you're going to be getting into, can get deep, you know. I'll try to, you know, keep it up here. But anyway, that's what I'm shooting for. I cut because I just had to. This paper was originally, this program was originally a seminar paper that some of y'all that have been coming here a while are familiar with. We used to have a seminar every winter instead of these lectures, and like we do today, and we were required to publish an article on it. So the article in its entirety with everything cut out on it, and there's some great articles in there from some Rangers. Eric Campbell's in there, Scott Hartwig, Carlton's in there, a lot of Rangers that some are here, some are gone. But there's some meaty stuff in there that you can find them for free online if you look up Gettysburg National Military Park seminar papers. So anyway, I am so excited, and I'm really excited to show you all this. This is probably the highlight. Hello, General Lee. How are you, man? You're right on it. Okay. Me or you be in jail. We can accommodate you if you'd like to go. I mean, we do have zip ties available for the masses that you would like to go. Okay, Patrick says we're ready to go. I am so excited to show you an extended clip, an edited clip from the movie Gettysburg, which none of you have seen before. Brand new. And because you waited all day, you're going to get to see this 10-second clip, which was not included in the movie. For obvious reasons. Okay. This thing on, let's see. So, yes. Okay. Here we go. There you go. What do you think of that? Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, you should put it in there immediately, right? If y'all want to, you can have a seat. If y'all want to sit on that floor, we're going to be here a while. You're not going to be bothering anybody with that. All right, let's jump off into this. We're going to discuss the planning of Picketts Charge. Okay, so The actual plan of Picketts Charge has possibly caused, it played it again, more debate than any other single aspect of the Battle of Gettysburg. In the post-war years, veterans wrote prolifically on the subject. The problem for battlefield students and scholars is that many times those post-war accounts are inconsistent, due in large part to the fact that the assault plan changed several times throughout the morning of July 3rd. The assault plan changed many times, and I'm going to go through a few iterations of those plans. The Civil War veterans further compounded the problem by writing on what actually happened. You never write about what should have happened. You write about what did happen. And also many details of the plan, despite the volumes of letters and memoirs written about it, remain unclear. There's a lot of people that are key to understanding what should have happened that were killed. And you'll just never have it. Not germane to Picketts Charge, but I'll give you one stark example, John F. Reynolds. I mean, there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask him. So same thing about Picketts Charge. Hence, even today, the actual plan is very difficult to decipher and therefore makes the task of understanding the day's events all the more daunting. So, Robert E. Lee would simply write about July 3rd and starting his plan, his report, I should say. The general plan was unchanged. And this meant simply that the Confederate Army would renew the offensive plan of July 2nd by attacking both flanks of the Union line simultaneously. Quote, Longstreet, reinforced by Pickett's 3 brigades, was directed to attack the next morning. In other words, the divisions of Major General John Bell Hood, now under law, in case you don't write me letters, and Lafayette McLaws, reinforced by Pickett's division, would attack the Union left again on July 3rd. Lee believed that the ground gained on the Peach Orchard area could serve as an artillery platform to support the assault. The attack would ignore the Round Tops and strike the southern end of Cemetery Ridge. In conjunction with Longstreet's attack, General Richard S. Ewell's Corps was prepared to renew the fight on the Culp's Hill area. That's on the Confederate left or the Union right. Lee hoped that the combined pressure on the Union flanks might lead to a greater tactical opportunity, if not a breakthrough of the Union lines. Now, Lee and Longstreet had not met the previous night, which may have led to some confusion about the plan of attack. However, there's no doubt that an attack order was issued. During the evening of July 2nd, Battalion Artillery Commander Colonel E.P. Alexander visited Longstreet's headquarters and recalled, quote, I was told that we should renew the assault early in the morning, that Pickett's division would arrive and would assault the enemy's lines. My impression is the exact point for it was not designated, but I was told it would be to our left of the Peach Orchard. In another recollection, he remembered his orders, quote, in brief, that our present position was to be held and the attack renewed as soon as Pickett arrived, and he was expected early. Campbell Brown, an aide on General Ewell's staff, shared Alexander's recollections. On the night of the 2nd, he wrote, we received word that the attack would be renewed at daylight of the 3rd. By Longstreet, we were to cooperate as before by opening with artillery and engaging the attention of the enemy as far as possible. So here you go. There's clearly an expectation of an attack. And clearly, reading between the lines, I mean, Campbell Brown is Ewell's stepson. I mean, he's about as close to Ewell. I mean, he's seen Ewell in his underwear. I mean, you know, he's that close right there. I mean, this can't be a fluke. Now, how far they've gotten ahead with the plan is not, but Lee is attacking on July 3rd. So, when Lee arrived at Longstreet's headquarters at early dawn, cannon fire from Culp's Hill area announced that the fighting had resumed at that quarter. What happens over there? The Union troops start shooting. They're ordered to attack. They don't want to attack, so they start shooting, and then the Confederates make an assault, you know, whenever, an hour or two later. And so when Lee arrives at early dawn, they could hear the cannon fire. Longstreet recalled the moment that he began the conversation by saying, General, I have had my scouts out all night, and I find that you still have an excellent opportunity to move around to the right of Meade's army and maneuver him into attacking us. He replied, pointing his fist at Cemetery Hill, "The enemy is there, and I am going to strike him." I felt then that it was my duty to express my convictions and said, "General, I have been a soldier all my life. I have been with soldiers engaged in fights by couples, squads, companies, regiments, divisions, and armies, and should know as well as anyone what soldiers can do. It is my opinion that no 15,000 men ever arrayed for battle can take that position," pointing to Cemetery Hill. General Lee replied, in reply to this, ordered me to prepare Pickett's division for the attack. I should not have been so urgent had I not foreseen the hopelessness of the proposed assault. And I felt, what did I say at the beginning of this talk? I felt that I must say a word against the sacrifice of my men. And then I felt that my record was such that General Lee would or could not misconstrue my motives. I said no more, but turned away. Most of the morning was consumed in waiting for Pickett's men and getting into position. Longstreet later wrote in his autobiography, Manassas to Appomattox, that, quote, "The general seemed a little impatient at my remarks, and so I said nothing more." How many of you have ever experienced that? Right? Where somebody showed impatience at your remarks. So, Longstreet's lack of preparation for renewing the assault Lee had planned must have irritated the tired Army commander, is what he's not saying. And now a senior Corps commander was proposing a movement completely contrary to his wishes. Regardless, he had to deal with the present situation. Ewell's assault must halt in order for coordinated attack to be executed. A courier carrying orders to disengage rode swiftly to Ewell, but the message arrived too late. Ewell's corps had already assumed the offensive, rendering Lee's grand plan for a coordinated attack impossible, and Longstreet's men were not in a position to renew the offensive on the Confederate right. In fact, Pickett's division had not even arrived on the field, for that matter, and even roused from its campground in the rear. So, Pickett's not even up, and Ewell's already fighting. In the post-war years, Longstreet glossed over Pickett not being in place. In his memoirs, he went so far as to insinuate that he had received no orders for renewing the offensive, and that Lee should have ordered Pickett to the front. But even Longstreet's staunchest defender, William G. Piston, admits that Longstreet had erred. This is Piston. Incredibly, Longstreet failed during the night to order the division into a position where it be ready at dawn to support either an attack on Cemetery Ridge, a movement around Little Round Top, or for that matter, a strategic maneuver to force Meade to do the costly attacking. This oversight remains inexplicable. Had Pickett been available for immediate support from any direction, Lee could have ordered McLaws and Hood to attack from their present positions in order to give Ewell's assault at least a chance of success. In one of the most charitable moments, that's end of quote, in one of the most charitable moments of any battle report, Lee stated, quote, "General Longstreet's dispositions were not completed as was expected. But before notice could be sent to General Ewell, he had already become engaged, and it was too late to recall him." Despite the miscarriage of the original attack design at dawn, Lee still held hope that Longstreet's First Corps could renew the offensive, and Lee and Longstreet, with their respective staffs, rode out to the Peach Orchard area to reconnoiter the Union position. When they get there, this is a who's who of Confederates at the Peach Orchard on July 3rd. Now, we interpret the Peach Orchard today because it's a Union position. Well, it's a United States park, That's who signs my checks. And so the commissioners way back in the day, they decided that was the way it would be interpreted. In other words, you could easily have cannons pointed in two different directions in the Peach Orchard. We just don't. You can see their logic in not wanting the present-day visitor to know that. And you have to wonder if there was any influence of Dan Sickles and all that too, but yeah, out there. Wouldn't want to confuse the public if he held the position or not. So to go back, yes. Go back to the peach orchard, and it's in Confederate hands. The group included Charles Venable from left to right, Walter Taylor, Armistead L. Long, and eventually A.P. Hill and Henry Heath, and of course the respective staffs of Longstreet and Lee. Colonel Taylor remembered the attack plan that, quote, Longstreet should endeavor to force the enemy's lines in his front. That front was held by the division of Hood's and McLaws. To strengthen him for the undertaking, it was decided to reinforce him by such troops as could be drawn from the center. Taylor further states that, quote, because of the apprehensions of General Longstreet that his corps was not strong enough for the movement, that General A.P. Hill was called upon to reinforce him. So you Gettysburg aficionados are hopefully getting the general plan. As additional proof, Taylor points to General A.P. Hill's report that his troops were, quote, to report to Lieutenant General Longstreet as a support to his corps. That's what Hill says, in the assault on enemy's lines. As far as Lee's understanding of the role of Hood and McLaws divisions, Colonel Charles Venable claimed, quote, that he called his attention to it long after, meaning Lee. He called his attention to it long after when there was a discussion about it. And Lee said, I know it, I know, I know. So Venable, Venable doesn't say, but I imagine that he is writing the report for Gettysburg, and he's sitting there in the tent with Lee, and he's like, am I clear on this? Is this what happened? You know, it's the way I imagine it anyway. So to summarize, the plan of assault called for Longstreet's First Corps, Hood, McLaws, and Pickett's division to attack the southern end of Cemetery Ridge. A.P. Hill's infantry, probably Pettigrew's division, was to serve as a support for Longstreet's left, and the exact role of Pickett's division in the plan is not known. Perhaps the Virginians were to support McLaws and Hood's division, or possibly they were to bridge the gap between McLaws' left flank and Pettigrew's right flank, which is essentially the same placement in the final assault. I don't know. I mean, I told you at the beginning of the talk, there's gaps in this thing, and so I just wasn't able to figure it out. Therefore, the question remains, if this many Confederate officers had the same recollection regarding the elements of this plan, why did it not take place? If all these Confederates are saying this, why did it not go down as they recalled? So I want to look at that. In 1877, right here, I'm very tempted to have you read right now. No, you don't want to read. In 1877, Walter Taylor posed that question to Longstreet. Taylor's understanding was that, quote, an assault should be made on your front by your corps, reinforced by Heath's division and 2 brigades from Pender's. My recollection is distinct in that all of your divisions were to take part in the assault, and I never did understand why Hood and McLaws were never ordered forward. Colonel Venable agrees with me entirely in this particular. So, Longstreet, and you have to remember by 1877, they've been pounding on old Pete for a long time, these old Confederate veterans right here. So I doubt Longstreet is in the mood, especially to hear from Lee's staff officers. And Lee has passed away. So Longstreet replies in true Longstreet fashion. In reply to your inquiry for a statement in regard to the supposed orders of General Lee in reference to the Battle of the Third Day, I have only to say that General Lee gave no orders for placing the divisions of McLaws and Hood in the column of attack on that day. I cannot therefore have any explanation to make at this time why these divisions were not in that column. So succinct. in his response. Therefore, the only logical conclusion that I could come to, and I'm open to whatever y'all want to come up with because I'm guessing along with y'all, the only conclusion I could come to is that Lee and Longstreet had a subsequent discussions regarding the planning for an attack, and that Taylor, Long, and Venable were not present at this. So something was decided. It doesn't mean, I don't know when. Whatever happened, Lee's report encapsulates the thought process that led to the second plan. General Longstreet was delayed by a force occupying the high rocky hills on the enemy's extreme left, from which his troops could be attacked in reverse as they advanced. Who does he mean by the high rocky hills? The Round Tops. He had been embarrassed by that. Longstreet. His operations had been embarrassed the day previous by the same cause, and he now deemed it necessary to defend his flank and rear with the divisions of Hood and McLaws. He was therefore reinforced by a Heath's division and 2 brigades from Pender's, to the command of which General Trimble was assigned. General Hill was directed to hold his line with the rest of his command, afford General Longstreet's further assistance if required, and avail himself of any success that might be gained. From the available evidence, it appears that all the troops selected to participate in the new plan of attack did in fact participate in the assault. But if McLaws and Hood were not included as part of the assault column, what role were they assigned to plan in the grand assault? The evidence is not clear what they were supposed to do. All right. Another interesting, though largely overlooked aspect of Picketts' charge is the time of the planned assault. Despite Pickett's division not being in position on the morning of the 3rd, the evidence, although scant, suggests that Lee wanted the assault to begin in the morning of July 3rd. At some point, Lee informed Ewell that Longstreet's attack would begin at 10 a.m. When Lee designated the 10 o'clock hour for the attack to begin is not known. A logical assumption would be that the time was designated in the early morning hours and that Ewell was notified of this at the same time he was directed to delay his offensive because Longstreet was not prepared. If this is correct, Longstreet would have had 4 to 5 hours to make his preparations. It is improbable that Longstreet was not aware of this time and had very likely helped set the time for the attack. The new attack plan necessitated the shifting of many units, especially the artillery. Confederate units began to deploy on Seminary Ridge around mid-morning. Colonel E.P. Alexander states, "A clump of trees in the enemy's lines was pointed out to me as the proposed point of our attack, which I was incorrectly told was the cemetery of the town, and about 9 o'clock I began to post it for the cannonade. By 10 o'clock, 75 guns from the 1st Corps artillery were in position, and as far as the infantry, Major Charles Peyton, commanding the remnants of Garnett's brigade, a major commanding the remnants of Garnett's brigade after the charge, stated that Pickett's division arrived at Seminary Ridge at 9 o'clock also. The puzzling aspect is why the assault did not go forward at 10 o'clock per Lee's timetable. Pickett's men were on the field, the artillery was in position, and yet Longstreet gave no order to attack. That there was also some delay furthermore explains Pickett's movements into position in front of Seminary Ridge roughly 4 hours before the start of the actual cannonade. Otherwise, it seems unlikely that they would have exposed the troops to the blazing heat of the open ground for so long before the attack. The cause of the delay and whether Longstreet gave his reasons for it to Lee is unknown. Perhaps he simply hoped Lee might change his mind about the assault. Maybe that's what he's looking for. Regardless of the reason, this is very important, the right wing did not attack at 10 a.m. They didn't attack. You know that. If Ewell was alerted to the delay, it came too late, for at 10 a.m. he executed his orders and he attacked. roughly at 10 o'clock, Richard Ewell assaults Culp's Hill. The brigades of Stewart, Daniel, and Walker assaulted the entrenched Union positions along the face and lower crest of Culp's Hill, and it turned out to be a useless effusion of blood. So I found that very interesting from the simple sense that I started the question out. It's Picketts Charge, the march of Pickett's division to get into position on those open fields. Which, if you're a Gettysburg buff, you've crossed that field before. And if you're hardcore, you're probably going to be trying to cross that thing later today when I let you out of here. And when you do try to go across there, you'll probably be meeting him, okay? Because he's going to have to come out there and pick you up after you faint, all right? In his air-conditioned cruiser out there. But we told you not to go across that. But in all seriousness, what were they wearing? It's not a trick question. What they got on? It's one of the few occasions I've ever read in the Civil War where they talk about men throwing up. And those men were so sick out there that they had to double the stretcher bearers to get the sunstroke victims off that field before the assault even got out of there, right? That's crazy. They're wearing those wool uniforms. So let's go back to what I just said. They march them out there at 9 o'clock. These armies are too good to march men out in that bare open field for that long a time period and not expect that assault to go forward. You'd never do that to your infantry, ideally. You would march them. In other words, you would bring them out of the shade at the last minute so they would be fresh, because they're the ones got to come across that field. The Union guys, they get to stand there and defend. They're not expending that energy. But when you're assaulting, you're not dawdling people. These people are moving. When you're coming across that field, they're not jogging or whatever, but they're moving at a very rapid pace. And so, clearly that assault was supposed to take place at 10 o'clock. If all else fails, you can look at Richard Ewell's orders. Report for the Battle of Gettysburg. He clearly says that in his report. So what is happening on Seminary Ridge? Why is this not going forward? I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. So the revised 10 o'clock assault plan also apparently removed any contemplation of using Hood and McLaws divisions, which eliminated up to 9,700 men from the attacking force, or a reduction of 42% of the whole assault force from what Lee may have originally contemplated using. The front narrowed from approximately a mile to a half mile, with the objective becoming a salient point on Cemetery Ridge where a small copse of trees stood in the center. Otherwise, it appears to me that Hood and McLaws would probably be assaulting somewhere from starting at the north half where Little Round Top ends. I'm not saying that's the exact point, but somewhere in that vicinity, all the way up to the Pennsylvania Monument and past that to our modern day copse of trees. That's where that assault was supposed to take place. That whole front, when you drive that in your car, would have been under a Confederate assault. And, Lee acquiesced. It's up to Robert E. Lee. He's in charge. In the end, Lee placed a total of 11 brigades at Longstreet's disposal for the final assault plan, or approximately a total of 13,500 men. Okay? And then the troops, that they comprised the assault of are questionable too. If you're following what I'm saying here, the blue arrow which you see on the map here, those are originally supposed to be support troops. They're not supposed to be part of the main assault. They're supposed to support. And what does that mean? What is the difference in that? Well, Longstreet's going to hit them, And once the Union line starts moving, then Hill will come in there and push them, support them, support the assault. But they're not supposed to be in there initially. And I need not tell you that A.P. Hill's men, a lot of those units should have never been in that assault. They just were not in combat ready shape. I don't know what the modern military calls it. But a lot of them had sustained significant losses on July 1st. Davis's brigade, for example, Mississippians and North Carolinians are fearfully cut up in the railroad cut. And both those, Pender's division, even that, they suffered significant losses trying to take the actual seminary position. We could go on and on. Pettigrew's brigade duking it out with the Iron Brigade. And they're all in this assault again. And it's just, I don't know. It's one of those gray areas or black areas where you just don't have any information. Is it poor Confederate staff work? I don't know. Was Lee aware of it? I don't know. But the big point I want you to get out of this is the support troops become part of the main assault as what we know as Picketts Charge today. Those support troops are moved into the assault. So, those of you that have read about the actual execution of it know how that turned out. So let's switch gears again and move on. What was the objective point of Lee's grand assault? What's the objective point of it? Because this lingers and will always linger around Gettysburg. Much confusion has resulted from Confederate commanders using the words, quote unquote, Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge interchangeably. You have to watch that. You have to remember the Confederates did not spend a lot of time at either location. So especially in the post-war years or during their reports, they sometimes make mistakes. The two most prominent Confederates who referred to Cemetery Hill in their writings were Alexander and Longstreet, and apparently many Confederates mistakenly assumed that Cemetery Ridge was actually Cemetery Hill. And Alexander did not realize the error until 1907. In his military memoirs of a Confederate, Alexander stated, a clump of trees in the enemy's line was pointed out to me as the proposed point of our attack, which I was incorrectly told was the cemetery of the town. Pickett's staff officer, Walter Harrison, returned to the Gettysburg battlefield in 1894, and Harrison explained to historian John Batchelder, quote, what an important feature that copse of trees was at the time of the battle, and how it had been a landmark toward which Longstreet's assault of July 3rd had been directed. Harrison is Pickett's acting assistant and inspector general, AAIG, surely knew the objective of Pickett's division. All right? He's on Pickett's staff. Do you think he just came to Gettysburg and made that up? Some scholars contend that the copse was not a large enough landmark for the Confederates to align upon from Seminary Ridge. Well, this is correct to a certain extent. How are you going to align, 12,000 men on that copse of trees right there? But Confederate artillery and high-ranking officers could see the copse of trees from Seminary Ridge and focus their attention on that area. But Pickett's men could not see the copse from their starting point. So, as stated above, the Cadore barn served as an initial guide. The barn was the guide, and then the copse of trees. After crossing the Emmitsburg Road, the brigades, especially Kemper's, needed a new guide point, and the copse of trees served that purpose. But before we get away to what they could align upon, and if it was or was not the copse of trees, let's consider this. Burkett Fry's fence, as I have aptly named it here today. The alignment of the attack points to the copse of trees as the terrain feature guiding the attack. Burkett Fry, who is the center brigade only had to maintain a straight approach in order for the rest of the brigades from Pettigrew on his left and Pickett on his right to align on his flanks. The support line of the assault supplies more evidence. The three rear brigades, I'll put a map up there. The three rear brigades, led by Armistead, Lawrence, and Lane, all initially started at the center of the assault column. The brigades were placed to give weight to the center of the assault column to exploit any breakthrough of the first line of the brigades. And what point did the second line initially head toward? They headed toward the copse of trees. Okay? They may not have been exactly aligning upon it. So to reiterate about Burkett Fry's fence right here, it's if I'm going to assault you, right? If I told everybody out here to walk in a straight line, if we all lined up on Seminary Ridge, on Seminary Avenue, and I said to everybody, I want you to walk a straight line across this field. Everybody in this room would walk a straight line across the field. The only problem would be you would all end up at 120 different points, right? Because everybody has a different idea of what a straight line is. And so, ask Dan Sickles. And so you have to have a commonality to get everybody on the same page. So if I'm moving toward you, what they did was, or I conjecture that they did, is Burkett Fry, I know beyond a doubt, was this brigade center of direction, the brigade of direction. So what does that mean? If Fry is in the middle and I got Pickett over here and I got Pettigrew over here, in order to get everybody on the same page, everybody aligned upon me. Okay, so as we go across the field, the line is moving toward the center, or it should be moving toward the center. And so that's the way we get a solid line of men and everybody on the same page as we start to come across. Right? So, what did Fry line upon? Because Fry, if you line up just simply Fry's brigade, he's got to have a line of direction too. Well, it's the fence. If you align upon the fence for you Yankees out there, if you align upon the fence, thank you, ma'am, for that one laugh. You're the only one out of 120. If you line upon that fence, the fence doesn't move. Can I say fence one more time? Okay. So you line up on that fence right there, and the fence keeps you straight as you're coming across. And so since you have a line of direction, the rest of the column can come in. That's what I'm thinking. Now, whether Longstreet dictated that to him, I doubt it. That's probably something that Burkett Fry. He'd be a fool not to use it. Why wouldn't he use it? And so the next time you go out there, our nice maintenance staff usually keeps a path mowed along through there so you can follow that fence. And where's the fence go? The fence goes right to the angle where it's jutting out. So that's just a hypothesis on my part, but and let's look at something else. If that doesn't wet your whistle right there, Where's all these guns going? Where's the majority of the Confederate artillery going? Where are they firing? The placement of the Confederate artillery in the eventual bombardment lends further support that the assault intended to strike near the copse of trees. Confederate artillery batteries show through their placement on July 3rd that the point of attack was Cemetery Ridge. And so the batteries along Cemetery Ridge are just decimated. The battery south of it, Freeman's McGilvery's line, present day Pennsylvania Memorial, that are south of the copse of trees, they didn't receive much damage. Why? The Confederates weren't concentrating on them. That's twofold. Number one, they could have concentrated on them, but they weren't firing. Remember that big debate between Hunt and Hancock about whether the artillery should be firing? Well, down there they don't fire because that's Hunt's guns. And McGilvery's not going to open up. His boss is Henry Hunt. But over here by the copse of trees, where are the guns firing? Hancock's guns are booming. So you've got, where did they inflict the most damage? The heaviest losses among Union artillery were Arnold, Cushing, Brown, and Rorty, the 4 batteries along Cemetery Ridge. Woodruff's battery, located at Ziegler's Grove or / the Bryan Farm as we know it today, several hundred yards to the north of the copse, did not sustain the casualties of the other batteries. They just weren't firing that many shells. Why? Because Confederate artillery did not target this area as heavily as the objective point of the impending assault, the open face of Cemetery Ridge. In conclusion, this attack culminated at its designated point. It's not a fluke that all these Confederates are going to end up right there. Okay, I'm doing pretty good. How are y'all doing? Right there. General Lee's with me back there. I like it. There you go. Okay. Nobody has any idea why I keep calling you General Lee. You do? Did you watch the Dukes of Hazzard too? I like the Dukes of Hazzard right there. I always wanted a car with one of them horns on it right there.
In and out of my mom's window when I got in trouble for it.
You did? You crawled in and out of your mom's window?
At the passenger side.
You did?
Yeah. Once.
Once. You did it once. Yeah. The thing I can't get about, back then is, you could, I showed my girls, not having to do with Dukes of Hazzard, but I happened to find Smokey and the Bandit. Oh, yeah. And I found it on a streaming service, and I played it for my girls the other day, my 11-year-olds. And I was sitting there watching, when I was their age and a little younger, watching the Smokey and the Bandit. I mean, I wanted a Trans Am. What was that, a Pontiac 400 big block? Is that what it had in it? There's different models in there. But that's what I wanted. The thing, though, as I was watching it as an adult, and I can't figure out, maybe you could enlighten us over here, is, like Dukes of Hazzard or whatever, you could outrun the law and then meet them at the bar. And everything was cool, Oh, it's just it's good to see you, Roscoe Pico Coltrane. Right there, yeah. Which, I forget who that actor's name was that portrayed him. But Roscoe, my favorite scene from him is if you watch Jimmy Stewart in Shenandoah. And Roscoe is actually a Confederate soldier in Shenandoah. And the one scene, and I was a kid, there's not too many Civil War movies out there. But when that scene comes in Shenandoah where they have the cow in the middle of the field, and they hold a flag of truce, and the Confederate officer rides out there, and he's trying to shoo that cow back into the Confederate lines because they're hungry. And they start, the Yankees and the Confederates start cheering and everything. Anyway, Roscoe's laying there on the ground once the cow runs in the Union line. And he goes, he says something to the kid beside him. He goes, "We never stood a chance anyway." And then the Yankees overrun the line right there. That's what I think of when I think of Roscoe. But yeah, they don't meet you at the bar anymore. Unfortunately, that's too bad. Yep. It took me a long time to realize that was Waylon Jennings singing that song too.
Me too.
Yeah, it was just as to cut his head off, for whatever reason. Yeah. And Hollywood didn't like his band. Here's some trivia for you. They brought his band into the studio. I know there's more information you want, but they cut the demo, and they were doing the demos as far as filming for it, and they didn't expect it to go because there's a lot of demos going. Well, it took off, so they brought Waylon back to Hollywood, just him, and left his band behind. They made him use the Hollywood band for it. That's not his band. Anyway, y'all want some more Dukes of Hazzard trivia? I can right there. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these two men right here, and let's go back to what I began in the middle of the program at the beginning of the program about relationships and what I said about that, and how people, even friends have falling outs. I mean, if you're a friend long enough, friends long enough, you're going to have, bumps in the road or whatever. That's part of friendship. So the day of July 3rd, 1863, forever links Longstreet and Lee, and it culminated a campaign and a battle that carried all the South's hopes for independence. But in 1 hour, it was all over, and Picketts Charge passed into history. From the time the guns that fell silent, Lee sought to stifle all recriminations and acrimony over the defeat. For the most part, he was successful, but after the war and again after his death, Lee's supporters were quick to defend his actions and place elsewhere the blame for the defeat following Picketts Charge. The principal target for these accusations for the defeat here at Gettysburg became James Longstreet. Today, Gettysburg buffs still debate who should bear the lion's share of responsibility for the failures of Picketts Charge, Lee or Longstreet. The debate has degenerated into a factional sides. Any criticism of one party is dismissed by the other side as pure partisanship. You ever heard that? In the end, did he make a pun about politics? In the end, neither Lee nor Longstreet is entirely culpable or entirely guiltless. Longstreet held tactical control of the operation, while Lee insisted on its execution. So, where does it lie? As mentioned above, Longstreet and Lee did not coordinate well. Longstreet was not prepared to attack at dawn on July 3rd. In his report and later writings, he made the argument that his proposed march around the Union flank was far more feasible. In light of what actually happened at Picketts Charge, this movement and the Killer Angels, this movement has tantalized Gettysburg buff for years, despite the obvious impracticality of the entire plan. The main point overlooked in all this debate is that Longstreet's failure to have his command ready altered the entire assault timetable. Despite this setback, Lee tried to coordinate with Ewell for a 10 o'clock attack, but Longstreet still could not complete his preparations. In a post-war conversation, Lee complained that, quote, victory would have been won if he could have gotten one decided simultaneous attack on the whole line. Lee probably sent verbal orders for renewal of the offensive to Longstreet on the night of July 2nd. This was a mistake on the commanding general's part, for it allowed Longstreet room for discretion, and there is always potential for misunderstanding of verbal orders. But this does not excuse Longstreet. If the much-aligned Richard Ewell could comply with the orders, then so could have Longstreet. Longstreet knew full well the wishes of his commanding general, and he just chose not to follow them. He didn't want to do it. He says that, okay? And I go back to the beginning of this conversation, your relationship with your superiors. What is your obligation to your superiors to do that? Okay, and I leave you to decide for yourself. Once Lee arrived at Longstreet's headquarters, the two men reconnoitered the proposed assault area. This may have been the first time that Lee saw the ground firsthand, meaning from the advanced position the Confederates had gained on the second day. During the course of their conversation, whatever Longstreet said was sufficient for Lee to change his mind for two possible reasons. The first is that Lee agreed with Longstreet's assessment of the ground and therefore modified the attack plan. He could have agreed with him. He said, you're right. We'll just do something else. The second is that Lee simply was tired of dealing with an obstinate subordinate. If Lee's best judgment was to attack from the Peach Orchard and Seminary Ridge using 4 divisions, he should not have yielded. And that decision rests upon the shoulders of Robert E. Lee. I've spoken, y'all can see them on videos over the years, etc. I have 3 children, and a lot of you are parents in this crowd too. As your mama did or did not do, you cannot run a popularity contest. I mean, if you got to run them through the window of the car, then that's just the way it's going to be. It's going to be. My point is with Robert E. Lee, that Lee is everything you imagined him to be. He is, a consummate gentleman. He is a very formal gentleman. Not much to small talk. He could laugh, though, with people that he was comfortable with, but those were very few. He was called the Marble Man for a reason. But nevertheless, Lee was always very solicitous of other people's feelings. He always kept that in the back of his mind. His mother raised him that way, to always keep the other person's attitude and so forth, and look at it from their point of view. I just think that Lee's personality at this point, his wanting to be congenial and so forth, it worked against him at this point. Going back to my children, sometimes you gotta get in their face, so to speak, or else we're not getting anything done here. I try to be a little bit more patient than my father. There was no appeal process. No, feelings weren't on the menu about that. At this point, Lee Longstreet needs a good shaking. Somebody needs to get in his face one time. And that's just not Lee's nature. Right there. Now, I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just telling you what I read from the personalities. I'm trying to, be a historian here and remove bias. Even though my son's middle name is Lee. As far as the actual assault, Longstreet felt, as far as him personally, that he had done everything in his power to communicate the plan of attack in his troops, and truly felt that he had meticulously complied with Lee's wishes. To a certain extent, he did prepare his command. Numerous Confederates, from privates to colonels, recalled receiving a briefing before the attack. In no other attack in the Civil War did the privates have the expectations explained to them in such detail. On a larger scale, Longstreet also successfully informed the division commanders and hence the brigade commanders the objective of the assault. But as they say, quote unquote, the devil is in the detail. Longstreet overlooked many of the minor points that came back to haunt the Confederate Army. For instance, he appears to have given very little thought to what the Confederates would do upon breaking through. Another example is the miscommunication with Hill's command. Pettigrew's division should have been moved first instead of Pickett because they have a longer distance to cover. So the Confederates to the left of today's Virginia Memorial should have moved before the Confederates to the right of the Virginia Memorial. Those are the little things that basically culminate. Now, I told you we weren't getting into the actual assault. We're not doing that. But suffices to say, Pickett's division is already there at the Union position, and we could guess, but Pettigrew's division is just now basically coming across the field by the time they've already struck the Union lines. So, it's easy for me to say. It's easy for me to sit here and Monday morning quarterback this thing. I've had 163 years to figure all this out. He had 4 to 5 hours. So, we got to give him some grace. Longstreet's mindset on July 3rd, though, begs a closer look. One unguarded exchange with Alexander serves as a window into his mood. As Pickett's division advanced, Longstreet stated, "I don't want to make this attack. I believe it will fail. I do not see how it can succeed. I would not make it even now, but that General Lee has ordered it and expects it." Everything added together begs the question, How much did Longstreet's attitude affect planning and operations on July 3rd? And I ask you to search your own self. How many times in your life, personal or professional relationships, have you been given a task that you didn't want to do? Right? Honey, go get me another beer. Well, I woke up this morning, I got myself a... Anyway, that will make no sense on tape because the beginning of it, it's not going to make it. Yeah. Another indication of Longstreet's mindset is the significant time gap in the deployment of Pickett's division and the commencement of the attack. In his numerous writings, Alexander notes that he began to redeploy his artillery for a concentrated bombardment on Cemetery Ridge at 9 o'clock. He stated 2 times, 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, for the completion of the redeployment. Pickett's division arrived behind Seminary Ridge around 7 a.m. The Virginians deployed for the attack around 8 to 10 a.m. If all things were prepared, Longstreet could have tried to attack in conjunction with Ewell closer to 10 o'clock a.m. Instead, 2 to 3 hours passed even after this before the cannonade actually began at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Longstreet could clearly hear the guns over at Culp's Hill, and he clearly knew his commander's wishes. Apparently, he could not bring himself to order the assault forward, or as he wrote, the quote-unquote work of preparation was not yet completed. Yet again, perhaps Longstreet felt Lee would call the assault off if the coordination was not achieved. Longstreet is very consistent about not wanting to make the assault, writing, quote, "That day at Gettysburg was one of the saddest days of my life. I foresaw what my men would meet and would gladly have given up my position rather than share in the responsibilities of that day." So, before y'all start writing me letters about picking on old Longstreet, I'm trying to, he's trying to tell you what his attitude is. In point of fact, Longstreet did try to abdicate his position. He actually gave the decision to send the infantry forward to Colonel E.P. Alexander. Authors have related the story many times, but nevertheless it pays to read his message sent to Alexander before the cannonade began one more time. Yeah. Now, a lot of you were in the military. Longstreet's a lieutenant general. He sends this note to a lieutenant colonel. I had a boss one time that was trying to reprimand a guy here at the park, not a ranger or anything, one of the guides, and he was a stubborn one. He looked across the table and informed my boss that they had colonels in the Pentagon that were janitors. Right there. And so I don't know what happened after that. I thought it was a good zinger. But my point is this before it's lost. Lieutenant generals don't delegate to lieutenant colonels. Right? This doesn't happen. I mean, have you ever heard of that before or since? Now, Alexander is like a competent man, a very competent man, very smart man. But he didn't want none. Alexander recalled receiving that message and quote unquote receiving a sudden shock, which quote unquote presented the whole business to me in a new light. Alexander responded that if Longstreet had any alternative to the assault, he had better state it before the guns opened. And Longstreet once again threw the decision back on Alexander to verify whether the artillery had made great enough impact to send the infantry forward. Can you imagine, dear reader, on the brink of the greatest assault of the war, one of the entire stake of the battle, and possible independence rides, receiving a message from a lieutenant general that you, a colonel of artillery, are going to order forward the infantry. Longstreet, how many of y'all have seen that one? British observer Colonel Arthur Fremantle noted that Longstreet's actions after he had sent the first message to Alexander. He noted what Longstreet did. Fremantle wrote, "At noon, all Longstreet's dispositions were made. His troops for attack were deployed in a line and lying down in the woods. His batteries were ready to open. The general then dismounted and went to sleep for a short time." Longstreet later explained that he wished, when asked about that, he explained, quote unquote, he wished to study for some new thought that might aid the assaulting column. This series of events speaks volumes about his attitude and demeanor on July 3rd. And finally, the appointed time came. The artillery had done its best. Now the infantry must come forward. Alexander had written to Pickett, "If you are coming at all, you must come at once, or I cannot give you the proper support." But the enemy's fire has not slackened at all. Now the famous exchange between Pickett and Longstreet would take place. And Longstreet recorded the events in these words: "After I had read the note, Pickett said to me, 'General, shall I advance?' My feelings had so overcome me that I could not speak for fear of betraying my want of confidence in him. I bowed my affirmation and turned to mount my horse." Yeah. In retrospect, July 3rd marked a nadir in James Longstreet's leadership during the Civil War. And I want to say this too. I've often said this, and I'm going to get around to Robert E. Lee. Y'all hang on, all you Longstreet people frothing at the mouth in front of me right here. I'm going to get around to Robert E. Lee. Just give me 1 second. James Longstreet, for the entirety of the war, is a solid corps commander. And do not underestimate what it would take to command that many men, to control that much and the amount of chaos that's coming at you, and have to keep your cool and to make judicious decisions on a battlefield under high pressure situations. He was good. He was very good, and Lee relied upon him and would continue. It is unfortunate, though, and it'll never change, but it's unfortunate that Longstreet's career is judged by 2 days here at Gettysburg. I mean, the implications, the repercussions from Gettysburg are so high that, Longstreet, he's just judged by that. And to me, he's just not having a good day. Lee had not incorporated, from Longstreet's mindset, Lee had not incorporated many of his plans and suggestions, leaving the top lieutenant brooding and depressed. The previous day, his corps had attacked the federal position against his better judgment, suffered immense casualties, and gained very little ground, in his opinion. The next day, July 3rd, his chief asked him to attack again. And Longstreet looked across the field, foresaw another sacrifice of his men, and he tried everything outside of duty to avoid giving the orders to go forward. Now that's commendable, okay, in most situations. Longstreet did not intentionally harm Confederate chances. He did not intentionally do that. However, like anyone tasked with the job they did not want to perform, his work reflected this reluctance. Quote, "He," meaning Lee, "knew that I did not believe that success was possible," Longstreet later wrote. "That care and time should be taken to give the troops the benefit of position and the grounds, and he should have put an officer in charge who had more confidence in the plan." End of quote. Unfortunately, the Southern people did not have the full benefit of James Longstreet's sagacity on July 3rd. At some point, you realize that 200 people are watching you look at your phone. All right. Last subject I'm going to cover right here, one I'm very reluctant to. Oh, no, I may have a little bit. Robert E. Lee. Right here. It's so bad. Oh, I don't want to say it. Robert E. Lee bears culpability of his own for the attack. After all, he insisted on the assault going forward. If the Confederates had won a victory at Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee certainly would receive credit, wouldn't he? Therefore, with defeat, he must share the blame. He is the ultimate one who always gets the blame in a football game. You may have a crappy defensive team, but the quarterback's always going to get the scrutiny, right? Well, Lee's the quarterback. In order to understand the decision, one must understand Lee's mindset. The choice to attack was not if on July 3rd with Robert E. Lee's mindset. It's where. It's not if. There is no if in Lee's mind. There's where. Where's the attack going to take place? He believed that his army had won the first and second day of battle, and he was not going to leave the field without another try. That's what he's thinking. This decision constitutes the core of Lee's generalship, maintaining the initiative, unheralded confidence, and supreme audacity. Over the years, many historians have asserted that Lee came to the conclusion to attack Cemetery Ridge because he had tried both flanks and found them strongly defended. Therefore, Meade must be weakened at the center. This is not true. As this talk has hopefully shown, the idea to attack the center came about from the evolution of the plan. In the end, Lee shortened the original attack front, and the sole objective became Cemetery Ridge. Today, many visitors look across that open ground and still wonder, what was he thinking? Before the assault, Lee rode the ground with the eye of a trained military engineer. On the ground of Pickett's advance, he saw swells that gave the ability to hide the infantry and shorten the distance to the Union lines. Hopefully, the Virginians could close the distance to the enemy before receiving any substantial casualties. On Pettigrew and Trimble's front, the ground provided no shelter for the advancing troops. However, the use of the land was in some ways unavoidable. Lee thought he could compensate for this with an overwhelming artillery bombardment that would enable the infantry to advance without facing counter-battery fire. Lee erred in judgment in the troops that he chose for the assault. And I said this earlier, his decision, as stated earlier, resulted from the plan's ongoing evolution. Pettigrew was originally a support to the attack, and now his men were part of the main attack force. Lee should have looked more closely into the troops' composition. He should not, if he did at all, relied upon Longstreet. Longstreet has no idea about A.P. Hill's troops. He's not under their direct command. Furthermore, the number of men or brigades he planned for did not constitute a large enough assault force for the anticipated impact. And according to one Confederate, Lee held back the rest of Hill's corps in case Longstreet's attack failed. And nevertheless, he should have strengthened the assault column from somewhere. He did not give Longstreet sufficient troops to meet his objective. Lee expected Longstreet to rearrange and launch his assault in conjunction with Ewell at 10 a.m. This time obviously passed without an assault. One must wonder, with the timetable thrown off and the ability, at least on the Culp's Hill front, to achieve simultaneous pressure diminished, why did Lee carry forward with Picketts Charge? Why did he go forward with it? The answer once again lies in the artillery. The artillery bombardment was not just created to create smoke. Lee hoped for an effective bombardment that would suppress the Union batteries and demoralize the infantry. With the achievement of these objectives, marching across that field would become much easier. For this purpose, Lee amassed 147 cannon, which should in theory have been sufficient to achieve the objectives set out for them. No Civil War commander had ever focused that much guns on a single target. Nobody's ever done that, especially on the Confederate side. The Confederates actually had tactical superiority in artillery pieces on July 3rd. That's the problem or the advantage from having exterior lines compared to interior lines. Think about it sometime. That's the advantage. Lee's a military engineer. The artillery also had another purpose, one often overlooked by those studying the battle. The batteries were to move forward with the infantry and give direct artillery support both to the front and to the flanks. The flank support would deter any Federal movements in that area and allow the full weight of the assault column to impact Cemetery Ridge. In actuality, the bombardment proved ineffective. Alexander had gauged the time for the bombardment at roughly 20 to 30 minutes, and in that length of time, the Confederate artillery was not able to suppress their Union counterparts. Therefore, the guns kept firing. And by the time Pickett advanced, after over an hour of shelling, the Confederate artillery had expended all of its ammunition and was unable to provide support for the advancing infantry. Alexander informed Longstreet of the ammunition situation as Pickett's men started forward. Longstreet was shocked and ordered Alexander to halt Pickett in order to replenish the artillery ammo. Alexander stated that the effects of the bombardment would dissipate in the time it took to refill the limber chest. The critical decision point had come, but Longstreet did not feel he had the authority to call off the attack with Lee nearby. Therefore, the infantry went forward, and the rest is history. In conclusion, Lee noted in his report that he was unaware that the artillery had run out of ammunition and quote, were unable to reply or render the necessary support to the attacking party. One does not know what Lee would have done had he known. Nevertheless, an important part of the plan went unexecuted. Now, for you Gettysburg buffs, what I mean by that is if that artillery goes forward, in theory, the Vermont troops on Pickett's right flank cannot move out, and the New Yorkers and the Ohioans are not going to be hitting the Confederate left flank. Does it mean it would have worked? Don't know. But a lot of potential Confederate assault troops that could have gone forward had to worry about the flanks instead. And especially on the left flank, they just shot them to pieces around, that Scottish restaurant on Steinway Avenue right there. And some of y'all are catching up with that. For those of you sleeping in the back, you missed a good one. On the right flank over there, the Vermont men couldn't turn it. And there's actually reports of Confederate soldiers firing in two different directions at times. They're just crossed over each other. They're jammed up. They get pinched. And, that's another reason they all bulk of them end up at the copse of trees and still further south. So anyway, finally, Lee's decision to attack lies in the high morale and sense of invincibility he and his men felt. Perhaps Lee exuded too much confidence at Gettysburg, or as Longstreet stated, quote, lost that matchless equipoise that usually characterized him, and that whatever mistakes were made were not as much matters of deliberate judgment as the impulses of a great mind disturbed by unparalleled conditions. Never did a commander show more faith in his men's ability than Robert E. Lee did on July 3rd. Whatever the causes of defeat at Gettysburg, Lee's confidence was unshaken. Writing in his after-action report, I think this is pretty good for y'all to hit the field out there. The conduct of the troops was all that I could desire or expect, and they deserve success so far as it can be deserved by heroic valor and fortitude. More may have been required of them than they were able to perform, but my admiration of their noble qualities and confidence in their ability to cope successfully with the enemy has suffered no abatement from the issue of this protracted and sanguinary conflict. Throughout his Civil War career, Lee exhibited a tendency to make costly frontal attacks, especially when faced with the stalemate on the battle. While the Confederate attacks at Malvern Hill and the Wilderness serve as cases in point of bloody frontal assaults, the most telling example is Picketts Charge. Picketts Charge, plain and simple, my fellow Americans, is the price that the South, the Southern people, paid for the type of general, the leadership, the generalship of one Robert Edward Lee. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Too. I mean, we're at the 163rd anniversary of the battle here, and I need not tell you that, and I'm speaking to the choir, I'm sure, that you would not be here unless you cared about this battlefield. You know, the person who was sitting out front at the front door at 7 o'clock this morning in a chair in order to get the first ticket to come into this building right here, well, you would not be out there. I mean, no other battlefield, I've worked at other battlefields, no other battlefield has people, they don't want to hear this, so don't go over and tell them about it, but they don't ever go in another battlefield park and tell them you've been to Gettysburg, okay? They don't want to hear. Because we have so many people that are involved with these fields, and it's on an aspect that is beyond comprehension. We, and I think I speak for the staff, are very, very blessed to have all of you. And we want to thank y'all for your continued interest in this. And when you go around, and some of you have been here first time, some of you have been here a dozen times, I want you to still, though, if you can, go out there in this 100-degree heat and stand there with Pickett's men on that field and stand there with Pettigrew's men. Or give yourself a break and go to the stone wall and be a Second Corps guy today, right there. But stand in those fields of those, in the shoes of those men here on these fields. Because your ancestors, your grandparents, not your Civil War ancestors, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, their tax money bought you the ability to be able to go out there today. And the blood of these revolutionary soldiers and the blood of these Civil War soldiers bought us the ability to sit in this room on a peaceful day in this air condition and study what they did. Okay? Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Get it all? All right, Mr. Gwynn's going to get mad at me. Y'all best get out of here.